Hello, everyone. My name is Tristan Reese. I'm the Director of Family Formation at Family Equality. If you're not familiar with Family Equality, we're the nation's leading nonprofit dedicated to supporting LGBTQ plus families and those who wish to form them. Normally, I am traveling the country doing in-person trainings for people who want to become parents, helping walk them through what are all the options for them as a queer person, and training providers as well, so that they're ready to understand, support, and welcome us when we come through their doors, and we don't have to do that work of educating them. And then all of this happened, and my job completely changed. And so my new job is to build engaging online events designed to connect and give community and joy to all of the families that we serve around the country. And so this event is just the latest in our whole series of events that are available on our website to learn more about. Tomorrow, we are doing another Drag Queen Story Hour, which I'm really excited about. And I just booked a tarot card reading class for ages 9 to 14. So if you have a tween in that age, I have a 9-year-old and she is excited. So we're doing all kinds of things to support parents and to give kids something to do, and generally to try and keep us from feeling really isolated during this time. Yeah. The final pitch I'll say is that on Monday at 4 p.m. Eastern, we are doing an all family hangout. So we're gonna invite all of our families to hop on and join us to just connect with each other, swap tips and tricks, and just sort of be in community with each other. Okay, so one of the things that I have been feeling overwhelmed about, one of the many things, as the parent of 3 kids, really is just the mental exhaustion and capacity and boundaries and fear that's going on for me as a parent. I have kids ranging in age from 2.5 to 12. And my eldest in particular, he already has, big feelings, and he needs a lot of support in working through them. And so us all in this house together, it's felt a little overwhelming. And so I reached out to Doreen, whose book I have right here, so you know that I am a legitimate fan. And Doreen really is, to me, one of the foremost people who's helping us think about how to be sane and connected and joyful in a modern world. And so, of course, she's the first person I went to be like, okay, how do we do that? But like in the middle of a pandemic. And so I'm really, really excited that Doreen has agreed to be with us today and walk us through some survival strategies for this difficult time. So pop your questions in the chat. I'm going to send them over as we go. Kimberly, I see you're with us from the Jersey Shore, which is awesome. So I will be here, but I'm going to turn off my camera. If you have any questions, send them to me. And Doreen, thank you so much for volunteering your time to be with us today. We really, really, really appreciate it.
I am so grateful for the invitation. Hello, everyone. I too have a new job, and that is figuring out how to do what I normally do, which is get to be in a room with people while I am talking with them, and I try to figure out technology. So we're going to try to do our best today or I'm going to try to do my best today to share with you some thoughts. Number one, on how to kind of navigate this time overall. And then number two, specifically as parents of younger ones, how to kind of think about and navigate some of the particularly difficult things with screen time right now. So I'm going to try to balance doing both of those. Whoops. And there we have our first, there we go. Okay, so the first thing I want to say is that in the time of a global pandemic, we are all in some ways being forced with a lot of really big feelings. And I think a lot about big feelings and the way that they kind of live in our lives, and especially within families where we have lots of different people of different capacities and ages and maturity levels all living together in a small space, especially right now when our spaces are limited. I think about parenting as kind of like using a sponge to clean up sponges or to clean up kind of messes or opportunities. So when we've had a really fun opportunity and we make a big mess on the counter, we take our sponge to clean that up. And if we do that over and over throughout the day, we clean up a few feelings here and a few kind of difficult situations here and a celebration here, and we never take time to wring that sponge out. We know that the last time we kind of go to clean up the next thing, we will actually make a bigger mess because our sponges are filled to capacity. So this is a time where we are all really trying to parent with a lot of kind of demands on us, and we are probably pretty soaked as a sponge. And so before we talk really very specifically about screens, I want to make sure that we talk a little bit about how in this time where we're all being very careful and very close, that it can really be a time where any kind of unresolved or unaddressed big feelings or traumas can come to the surface. And we know that with the beautiful kinds of families that exist in this space, there are frequently some very unique challenges, some very unique big feelings, and some traumas that maybe partners have gone through, or partners and parents have gone through on the journey to becoming a family. So I want to just give us a little bit of insight about how that's working literally at a physiological level. So the way that we, move out and about in the world is this kind of intricate, complex balance between what our brain tells our body to do and what that kind of amorphous mind that comes out of the brain and that soul or heart, the integration of those things with our bodies are what help us to function well. And the brain has some particular regions that are highly involved in managing difficult situations. So we have some certain regions of the brain right now that are being very over kind of stimulated. And I want to tell you about those. The first one is the amygdala, which is in the back of the brain. And this is called oftentimes the reptilian brain. It is considered kind of the automatic, it's what leads us to burp and move and breathe and just react. And it is also the region of the brain that is responsible for kind of alerting the body when there is something to be afraid of. So right now we likely have a lot of stimulation going on in the fear center of the brain. We also likely have a lot of stimulation going on in this front region, which is the anterior cingulate cortex, which has to do with feelings. So this is kind of what takes in information on a feeling level, and then it tells the brain in the back to be either afraid or mad or upset. Anyway, it's these two functions that are very responsible for our body's response to big emotions, meaning telling us to get out of a situation if we need to, or telling us to be hypervigilant. Then we also have a region of the brain that is crucially important. We're going to talk about it throughout tonight. But if we were to make a hand model of the brain, where this is that back center, or the amygdala, this is the front center where the feelings come in, and then this is another really important feeling center. This very top little area between the top knuckle and the tip of my finger is called the prefrontal cortex. And the prefrontal cortex is actually the part of the brain that is responsible for being able to apply rationality to our emotions. It's the part of us that's responsible for being able to have self-control, like when we want to just lose our minds, but we can kind of come back down and say, okay, my child did not mean to provoke me in that way. It's basically the CEO of the brain and responsible for self-soothing, for regulation, for being able to bring ourselves to a state of calm so that we can function even if we're stressed. And the difficult thing with times like now, where we either are being kind of confronted with past big feelings or unresolved things, is this prefrontal cortex is really kind of out of commission. With adolescence, actually, this part of the brain is the part that is in the highest demand, and it's also the part that's developing most wildly during the ages of like 13 to 25. And there's a very popular neurologist who talks about kind of when we're in really stressful situations, or if we're a teenager, which being a teenager is a stressful situation, we kind of have sprinkler brain, where literally that organizing part of the brain just disconnects from everything else, and the emotions and the fear take over. So I want you to be aware of that, because in some ways, the things that cause our brains to work in certain ways are being really, really provoked right now. So this is what I'm about to tell you about, is specifically the theory of trauma. But what I am finding more and more as the weeks that we're sheltering in place are going on, oh, you can't see my slides. Let's see what we need to do here. I am trying to show you my slides. Whoops. Let's see. I do this. Okay. Tristan, do you have a good idea for me? Do you want to pop on and maybe?
Sure. So at the
Thank
control
you.
panel, you should be
Yep.
able to use
Up
that
and
drop down of sharing, and then you should be able
yep.
to do show, and then there
Let's
should be a
try
little,
again.
there it is.
Yay. Okay. All right. So let's go back. Thank you so much for letting me know. Sorry, y'all. You didn't miss much excitement. Okay, so these are the regions of the brain, so that you can see that. And I can also get this to Tristan, and if there's a place to post it where the video is shown. But the sprinkler brain goes like this, and this integral part of the brain that is the prefrontal cortex is really disengaged while our emotions are high. So let's think about how this happens and how our brain kind of gets into these patterns, and then we aren't kind of able to function well. So the way that happens is I like to tell a little story. Like if you were walking through a field and it was a beautiful day and you were just looking up and around and you noticed a little round thing over to the side, but you didn't think much of it and you kept walking, and all of a sudden you felt a strong kind of a bite in your foot, and your whole body filled with adrenaline, and your mind started racing, and you felt very panicked and afraid, and you felt pain, and you looked down and, oh my goodness, that little round object over there was a snake. Well, what that does is it encodes in your brain that when you're walking along and you see a small round object, you should be afraid. Your feelings should alert you to stop. And this part of your brain that would reason those away, like I don't need to be afraid, actually gets disconnected from the whole process. So the next time when you're walking through a field and you see a small round object, even if it's a hose, your entire body responds as though it is a snake. And this is the way that we are so often then provoked when our feelings are high. Let's say that, conflict is something that in your own life has been a really traumatic thing, or times of being stuck in a home where you didn't feel like you could get out, it raises your anxiety. Those things are all going to be snakes that actually, are going to be kind of like things that your brain responds to as a snake right now. Your body is going to respond, with kind of panic or overreaction when there's conflict or difficulty. When your child says to you, because any child who's stuck at home in a fearful pandemic, not knowing what to do, says to you, I wish I could be anywhere but here, it's going to feel like a snake, even though it is a hose. And so the thing that I really want to stress for all of you is that we're really all right now as parents trying to clean up messes with soap sponges. We all have a lot of big feelings that we are experiencing as a result of this pandemic. And at the same time, we are being expected to do all kinds of new things we've never done, like keep our families happy, keep ourselves, well enough to take care of everyone. Maybe we're having to become homeschoolers. So I just want to normalize the fact that we're all stressed. And one of the biggest places that I'm hearing for families, especially with children who are school age, is that now not only do we have the stressors of trying to maybe parent children with very unique needs, or we're having to maintain, if this is a two-parent home, maintain two full-time jobs while also schooling our children. So it's really hard. And one of the biggest things that's coming up is this issue of screen time. And what I find is that it is sometimes the conversations or the interactions over screen time are becoming kind of symbolic of some of the underlying issues. So when Tristan invited me to talk, he was specifically asked if I could share a little bit more in detail about screen time, because that's also where the bulk of my research is. So keeping in mind that we're all, dealing with these big feelings that are shutting down the more rational parts of our brain. So it's actually normal right now to not be able to focus like we normally would. It's normal to feel like, oh my goodness, I started this extremely scheduled or very rigid schedule 3 weeks ago to do during this time, and now I'm so exhausted that I can barely get out of bed. These are normal responses to really abnormal times. And even before this time came, we kind of had a sneaking suspicion that our screen use was maybe an issue. And this is a picture in my house that happened years ago. My children now are adults, they're 27 and 25. But this was a day I walked into my family room, and every single person was not only on their laptop, but they also had their phone with them. and even before COVID became a real issue for all of us, the average American was spending 10.5 hours a day with screens. And this is having a pretty profound impact. And what the research was showing us is that for a lot of children, the kinds of experiences that they could have in these online spaces became much more enticing and much more interesting and much more compelling than any experiences that they were having with their parents. So parents were frequently coming to me and other experts in the field saying, you know, my child would much rather spend time with their device than with us. And this is creating really big parenting issues. So even though this is the case, that oftentimes the more immersive our screens have been, and the more, especially that our kids have used them historically for entertainment and for soothing, the habit and the habituated patterns are going to make it very difficult to now navigate a world where we're having to use screens even more for our connection and for our entertainment, and where we are also being watched 24 hours a day as models for our children. So I want us to think about the fact that even though we know technology is, you know, tricky, technology is neither good nor bad. Our screens right now, we're finding out, have this amazing potential to actually keep us going, right? They have the potential to make it work, that we can do the jobs we need to do. We can help our children get information. We can get resources. We can get support. We can do things like this. We also, though, however, want to keep in mind, even in this time, again, accounting for the fact that we're all exhausted and doing the best we can, we want to be aware that technology is not benign, that there are some really profound and difficult proclivities that they create in our lives and our brains, and especially in the lives and brains of developing children, that we do want to be aware of so that we can help them thrive while they're also using screens a lot. I also always want to start out by talking about this, especially with parents and families, about this as a non-shaming conversation that we want to begin. Really, at the end of this time today, I hope what you hear from me is that this issue is going to give us the opportunity to have all kinds of complex, connecting, beautiful, non-shaming conversations with our children and our partners. And that this is the thing that will really, really kind of help us be able to, I'm gonna click on chat, and I'm hoping it doesn't, it did, okay. Just wanna make sure I'm still being able to get communication from Tristan. Okay, so if we think about it in terms of non-shaming conversations, the kind of things that I am thinking about is that we are growing families and growing ourselves and growing children kind of like trees. And so this is what a beautiful, healthy tree looks like. And if you think about it, the kind of tree that grows up out of the earth is largely dependent upon this type of seed that was planted, but also there is huge amounts of input on this tree's development based on the contextual elements around it. And no group of families knows this more than you all, I believe. You know, the amount of the support that that tree gets from its environment and its context, the light from the sky, the water from the earth, the minerals in the dirt. You know, these things all deeply affect the shape and the trajectory of growth of the tree. This is a tree here on the Oregon coast, and then the coastal winds have just blown repeatedly over this tree. And over time, it has just kind of conformed to the shape of the wind. And in many ways, technology, especially for those school-aged kiddos, is deeply and profoundly shaping their development. And so again, in this time where we're using technology for fantastic things, we want to be able to tailor its use really, really well. So I want to give you just a little brief overview. Normally, I have to tell you, normally I will only agree to talk with parents if I have at least 3 hours. Somehow a 3-hour webinar just, did not seem doable. So I'm going to be flying through this information, hopefully to give you as many tools as possible. But these are the things that technology actually makes better. It appears to make us more creative in digital spaces when we use creative kinds of platforms. It makes us good collaborators, all these kinds of things. When we use certain kinds of technology, these are the kinds of things that can be really enhanced. The tricky thing is that the bulk of the technologies that we use are not the kind that are kind of creating and encouraging these healthy traits. So we do have to look at that same literature review. That came from a very extensive literature review from the last 4 years. And if we look at that same literature review, these are the traits that we may see as correlated with high levels of technology use that we might want to see less of. And if we take all of these and boil them down to their most kind of solid essence, these are the things that high levels of technology use are correlated with, especially in children between the ages of 3rd grade and kind of college. We're seeing higher levels of anxiety, depression, kind of a sense of competition and comparison, and then this sense of relational aggression that in the literature looks like things like eye rolling, using strong language when limits are set, a lot of what the literature defines as profane language, things like that. So we're seeing these traits, and what I want to help you do today is think about where is it worth having those complex non-shaming conversations, which battles do we pick, and then how can we privilege the kind of content with our kids that will help them avoid these traits, while at the same time helping them use as much technology as they need. The biggest key is that we moderate our use, all of us within our family. And it's going to take a few things to be able to do that, and I hope to give you those tools because the way technology is impacting us is in these 4 ways. So it's absolutely affecting the way our bodies are developing. It's also affecting our sense of self. It's deeply changing the way that relationships are formed, and then it's also changing just the way we are in our skin. So, normally I would go deeply into all of these, but I want to give you just the biggest kind of 4 things to think about in terms of how technology is shaping us, the biggest takeaways. The biggest takeaways is that we all arrived at this time of now amping up our tech use while also feeling all these big feelings that are really hard to just live day to day in, with a lack of ability to focus. So, basically screen-based stimulation, which again, Americans before this time were spending 10.5 hours a day with, which I need to make a point about that. The way that researchers get to that statistic is that now 85% of us use 2 technologies at once. So we're using our tablet or our phone and our laptop, or listening to a podcast on our smart speaker while texting on our phone. And the weight and the load on the brain when we multi-use like that is so intense that researchers had to put those times side by side. So if you're on a phone and a tablet for an hour, in terms of calculating the load on your brain and body, we have to say that's 2 hours of tech use. So I just want to also alert you that that's another thing to be aware of as we help our children and as we choose our battles. Even choosing to ask them to use one technology at a time is a radical act of health. So we all arrived at this time with a diminished ability to focus. Basically, the prefrontal cortex, that deep region of the brain that is so responsible for everything, has less robust wiring in it for individuals now than it did 5 years ago. And the only consistent dynamic we can find as a difference is our use of tech. We also arrived at this time with a really difficult time delaying. We have access to instant information, instant answers, and as a result, we don't really force ourselves to delay or be bored very often. And in boredom, in waiting, those are the places where we learn things like attuned communication, how to have conflict, how to work through strong feelings. So we're coming to this time already at a bit of a loss. And then finally, we arrived with kind of this diminished capacity to regulate, which just means that when we do have strong emotional reactions or even physiological reactions, we have a harder time than ever right now bringing ourselves down to kind of be calm. And that is a huge need in a time like this. The second big takeaway is that the risk of depression and anxiety with forms of media use, specifically with social media, which gaming is now considered a social media because it's a place where people have primary points of connection, are very highly correlated with depression and anxiety. However, the thing to know is that in the last year, we have significant bodies of research that are showing not only are depression and anxiety correlated with technology use, but actually there is a causal effect. meaning that exposure to social media for what the literature calls excessive amounts of time, which they call 30 minutes, which we know is not an excessive amount of time, that these things actually can then cause depression and anxiety. Similarly, in the research, 30 minutes of exposure to news or media information that is delivering the news in hyperbolic or in very fear-inducing ways will also create anxiety, clinically diagnosed anxiety. So the things as parents to know is that if you are seeing your children pulling back from social contact that they would normally have, if they are sleeping or eating excessively or very little compared to what they normally do, if you are watching them isolate, and if you are watching them become very disgruntled, especially for adolescents, if they are irritable, so they're quick to react in kind of even just a little bit turned up way than what they normally would be. These are the kinds of symptoms that we want to watch for in terms of depression and anxiety. And if you are noticing those things, I encourage you to go to my website, which I'll share you the information for that in a bit. I have lots and lots of hotlines and places where you can go to discern if the symptoms are becoming significant enough to seek out help. The third big takeaway from the way technology is impacting us is that we all have a higher need to actually teach the skill of self-soothing. You know, life used to just hand us opportunities to kind of be bored. We'd be in line, we'd be just, you know, we wouldn't have anything to do, so we'd kind of have to figure out how to manage that. Or we'd be sitting at a red light and we'd just have to kind of figure out like, oh, I really want to get where I'm going, but it's not going to help me to be all sped up. Now we never have to be alone with ourselves. And so self-soothing is really at kind of an all-time low culturally for us in the West. And it's important that we begin to think about how we can teach our children self-soothing. And then finally, the fact that we are really no longer forced to be creative in terms of coming up with embodied experiences anymore means that we are, number one, we have a diminished kind of longing for them or craving for them because we don't value them in the same way. And we also don't have kind of the ability to tolerate the awkwardness in figuring out how to come back to our bodies and be in our skin. And part of what is going to keep us healthy in this time more than any other thing is moving our bodies, taking time away from screens after we've worked at the screen all day, not then sitting and looking at it more for entertainment, but instead to move away, to move ourselves to a window or outside where we can get fresh air, to do some jumping jacks, whatever it may be. The tricky thing to know is that these things aren't just behavioral. It's not like we've just changed our behavior as a result of screen use and as our screen use enhances. The thing that we must know and be aware of, even in this time where we need these things more than ever, is that our brain literally uses a function called pruning, just like with a tree. If a certain branch is no longer producing fruit or leaves, we can prune that off, right? And then energy and resources don't go to the dead branch. Well, the tricky thing is in our brain, when we don't use certain regions, our brain does the same thing. It kind of stops wiring in that region of the brain. And so the trick that we have to all work through as parents is not allowing so much screen time, and it's not just screen time, not passively endorsing the wrong kinds of screen use that will cut off certain regions of the brain, like the prefrontal cortex. And there are some things that we can really do, and I want to empower you to do them. Because we want to raise these kids that are resilient, that have really richly wired brains. I wish we could go into how brains are wired. And we want them to be able to operate from what I call an internal locus of control. An internal locus of control is what it means basically to be a healthy person. When we feel overstimulated, we can come back to a place of calm. When we feel hurt or rejected or afraid, we can come into ourselves and find out, okay, where are the resources I need to access? Oh, I need to get on that website and check that out, or I need to call this friend, or I need to really ground my body, whatever it is. Most of us now, however, live from an external locus of control, where our devices actually are what we rely on for getting all of our information, all of our soothing, all of our distraction. Mostly we now do self-distraction rather than self-soothing with our screens. And so we really, really want to work at these things. So I'm gonna just check in with folks. If anybody has questions that they want to send Tristan's way before I move on, I give it like a beat of 10. And there's a lot more depth that we can go into, or that you can check out at my website too. So keeping all of that in mind, because now we're going to talk about how we can do some of this, like helping our families thrive in this time where the very thing that is kind of saving us is also something that can really hurt us. I just want to, again, just bring it right back to this room that we're all in and remind us that everything is wonky and that we need to be gentle both with ourselves and with our children and partners right now. It's time to adjust our expectations. I think there was this really big push that we were all going to, just hunker down and thrive together, and we were going to, learn to be bakers and have these amazing schedules. And for some of us, that is working really well. As we go through this situation that keep trying to remind myself and others is a marathon and not a sprint, we're going to need to pace ourselves, right? And so there may be times, even if you've got a great system that's going as a family, that you need to kind of dial back and adjust, so that we can keep things we can make it such that there are always going to be fresh legs for the next leg of the race. The first thing that I want to say is that it is crucial right now for parents to tend to self-care, especially as you are being given the task of educating and schooling your children. That is huge. So just like we would think about putting our oxygen masks before we put on the oxygen mask of our child, it is crucial that you make sure that you are doing the kinds of things that I'm going to talk with you about how to help your children do. Stepping away from screens, screening your own self to make sure that you aren't showing signs of really difficult mental health predicaments that we can get in, making sure you're keeping your body as healthy as you can be, and also really trying as much as you can to have 1 or 2 times a day that you literally can get some time for doing nothing as a grown person. And I know this is really tricky. I've been talking with a lot of people and trying to figure out how, especially when we are in tiny spaces that we are sharing, those of us who are in small spaces. One parent came up with a great idea, and that was, to use her shower. And I know I have done this in my bathtub. When you just need a break, if there are ways that you can get everyone in the house set up, because you're also showing your children that self-care and self-soothing is a priority when we're going to have to do this marathon together. So hunkering down in your shower or tub with no water, but with a blanket and a pillow, even that can be really helpful. Okay, I want to just give you a little bit of an idea of how, in all times, not just this time, I help parents think about how to evaluate their children's relationship with tech. Because a lot of times what most of us talk about and ask about is what's the appropriate amount of screen time, or how do we have screen time conversations? And in my opinion, after doing this work for 15 years, this is not about time. Time is only one element, but that element is important when it's considered with several other elements. So I just use this hand model, and what I do is I just write each of these letters across the top of a page. You just take a piece of paper and write A, B, C, D, T, and then the family member's name down the side, and then you can just rate each one of them on a scale of 1 to 5 or whatever you want to use. But first is just that ability to focus, delay, and regulate. So is my child, or am I, able to focus on one task at a time for 5 minutes? It used to be we would ask 30 minutes, but now we're asking, can they focus for 5 minutes at a time? And can they delay if they hear a text come in or they see something that's interesting? Can they keep focused? We really want to develop that skill. That is the kind of skill that will help, that is correlated actually with high levels of contentment in life. And then can they regulate, or can I regulate? Can I come back to calm aside from a screen, or am I always distracting myself rather than actually self-regulating? B is just balance. Do I have a balance of connections in my embodied life, which is going to be especially tricky right now, and in my online life? And am I comfortable with embodied connection? And that one, again, we may have to set aside for a while. C, this is a big one: content and context. This, if I raise this finger by itself, could get me in a lot of trouble, right? But we want to be thinking about what is the content that our children are consuming, and what is the context that they're consuming it in. Are they always turning away from others within the family to use their tech? Or are we able to use it all together? And is the content, you're going to hear me talk about this later, but content that is highly violent, highly sexualized, monetized, meaning we have to watch advertisements for it, or that involves really rigid gender stereotypes, those four kinds of content have particularly damaging potential for children, and also are much more highly addictive or dependence forming than other forms of content. So remembering content that is violent, sexualized, monetized, watching ads for it, or with rigid gender stereotypes, these kinds of content we really want to watch for. Then devotion, and I see some questions coming in. I love them. I will answer them in just a minute. Devotion in the West, this tends to be kind of an indicator of devotion, a ring finger. This just means, can you, do you know 3 phone numbers by heart? Can you get anywhere without Google Maps? Can you read a book or watch a movie without reading 5 Yelp reviews? Just like doing something spontaneously is like an act of radical brain health right now and personal health. Then against all those other measures is the measure of time. So if your child has a great ability to focus, they can delay gratification and delay tending to things. They can regulate. They have a good balance of relationships, and their content is really very, it's free of those four areas, and is based on doing research or connecting them with others, and they can play and be creative away from their devices, then time is not as much of an issue for those kids. If, however, there are some issues in these other 4 areas, time is one of the ways that you can help your children remain healthy. If they're consuming a lot of violence, then time and limiting that time is going to be more important. And how we do that, I'm going to get to in a few moments. So the questions, I think this is really good. How might things like ADHD impact our ability to think about length of time a child and adult can focus? Hugely. And there's a huge kind of question going around in the research community. Do folks who live with a diagnosis of ADHD have more of a tendency to be drawn towards screens? And so that's what the relationship is, or do screens actually create more of a neurological proclivity toward things that look like ADHD? And we just don't know yet. But we certainly want to be aware that if our child is living with or if we ourselves are living with a diagnosis of ADHD, that we aren't asking for huge amounts of focus, or that we are finding the tips and tools that help enhance focus and using them. So for instance, for many individuals living with ADHD, if they can listen to a very predictably rhythmed, non-lyric based music while they try to focus, their focus is enhanced. And so we always want to keep in consideration individual differences, always, and immense empathy. And then the other question, I wish we could go into this a lot. I'm going to try to address it really briefly. Just what do we know about violent video games in kids? And is there an actual causation? There is no research to this date that shows a causal effect between high levels of exposure to violent content and criminal acts of violence. However, there is a huge bulk of research that shows a very high correlation and causal effect between exposure to high amounts of violence, especially violence that you are exerting personal agency over. So if you're controlling the video game and it's violent, there is a high correlation and causation between what researchers call softer forms of violence, like bullying, like high levels of conflict with parents and others in authority, like disregarding experts, things like that. So there are a lot of kind of precursors of bigger forms of violence that are shown in the research to correlate. Okay, now we're going to talk about, in our last few minutes together, what can we do not only to kind of have good discussions with our children about how to help them moderate their tech use, but also be really healthy in every way so that tech is still just a part of life rather than the main dish. Because I think that's what has happened in a lot of situations. So I've just kind of, I've created an ABCDE model that hopefully we can remember. And the first is just to do what is needed in your environment and with your people to develop the ability to step away at least some of the time. If you take a bulk of Americans and put them in a small room for 10 minutes by themselves, and this is individuals over the age of 13, and you tell them you can either stay in here for 10 minutes by yourself doing nothing, or you can apply low-level shocks to yourself with that little box over there, something like 70% of them will choose to apply low-level shocks rather than actually doing nothing. And so what I think that tells us is that if we are going to be able to manage our big feelings in this time and be able to some of the time step away from technology that has the potential of hurting us, we're going to have to tend to developing self-soothing skills and boredom tolerance. And this is not easy, but I want to give you a couple of quick examples. One of the first things that I think every family could do that would be helpful is learn as a family how to breathe well together. And there are two principles. The first is that we, in order to breathe well for self-soothing, is smelling the roses, so inhaling through the nose, and blowing out the candles. Now, when most of us do that, we go like this, and we fill the top part of our lungs. But really, when we smell those roses, what we want to do is push oxygen all the way into the deep, lower capacity of our lungs. So when we smell the roses, we actually want our belly and the lower part of our lungs to expand out. Let's all try it together. Belly expanding out, and then dropping down when we blow out the candles. So smelling the roses and the belly extending out. Having one of these around and tossing it to each other, or having some kind of prompt within your family, like, hey, eye contact for 1 minute, and then maybe it's a sign you make of some sort, and that means take 3 deep breaths because we're gonna turn our screens off in 5 minutes. And then I'm going to remind you again. But breathing is a huge prerequisite. Another fantastic thing that you can do is have everyone pretend like they're ice cubes and frozen and every muscle is tense. And then you imagine the sun shining on you or a blow dryer blowing on you and everything beginning to melt until you feel drops, drips dropping off your nose and your fingertips. This is another thing where if everybody is feeling, tense, to be able to say ice cube, and everyone just has this practiced ability to come back to self-soothing. I have a dear friend, Yoga Calm, is headquartered in Portland. It's an international movement, and they now are doing Jedi training for boys and girls. I need to update the slide, but basically they give everyone a lightsaber, and I've heard of several families now who are doing this in this time because this is an idea that I share a lot. And everybody's got a lightsaber, and what do when they've got their lightsaber? They go right, which is just, again, that deep breathing. If we are going to be able to step away before we ever ask our children to limit their time or their content, we have to onboard these kinds of behaviors that will help them with self-soothing. This is just another thing borrowed from the 12-step movement, a great tool to use with families. And if we're going to ask this of our little ones can ask us the same then, where when we're feeling rigid or we're kind of overactive with our big emotions, to just ask ourselves, am I hungry, angry, lonely, or tired? And if that's the case, these are times where we have a tendency to just want to distract ourselves, maybe, watch one more show or pass one more level of the game, when in reality, it would be better for us to tend to the actual need that we have. The only way we can do this, though, again, is by practicing. And in order to practice, we have to do the B of the ABCs. We have to get buy-in. We cannot just, in an authoritarian way, step in and tell our kids, you only get this much time, especially right now, or, this content is out of here. We are going to have these strong, complex, non-shaming conversations, especially for the adolescents in our lives. Their technology has become a primary support. It's like these supports in this bridge that you see here. And if you just come in and arbitrarily take it away, the bridge will crumble. There's also the reality that we oftentimes ask a lot of our kids and tell them, that they have limits when we are not modeling that we have our own limits, nor are we committing to them that we will help them find the things that actually get their needs met. What that last slide was, that I can't get my slides to go back to right now, was just a vision of a contract. And in that contract, it has a clause where the parents have to commit. Not only does the child have to commit to being, wise and responsible and not dependent on their tech, but the parents have to commit to creating an environment that is enriching and helping their children have the kinds of embodied experiences that they want to have. So what I'm always telling parents is that in order to get buy-in, we as the grown people in a home must be willing to be inconvenienced and uncomfortable, because we are going to be asking a lot of our children. So we need to be aware of that. The C of the ABCs, so we're going to, sometimes step away. We're going to get buy-in before we ever try to limit their tech. And when we do begin to get buy-in with them and have these complex conversations, we want to talk with them about their content, and we want to talk with them about kind of how much of their content engages their creativity versus how much of their content just requires passive kind of consumption. And so what we want is we want high quality content, most helpful if they are doing something to either connect or create within it. So this is what I use. I just use this as a technology pyramid, kind of like a food pyramid, where most of us in our homes, we use technologies that entertain us the most. And then above that is, little less, we use technologies that connect us. We want to flip that. And we want to use technologies that connect us more, especially those that connect us in real time to full faces. I cannot tell you how beautiful the research is about eye contact or the gaze between two people and how building it is, especially to the child and adolescent brain. So any kind of technology like Skype or FaceTime or Zoom that can connect us is going to be the best. Then technologies that educate us. Again, we want gold standard. We don't want educational, as much as possible, educational content that we have to watch a lot of ads for, because that typically means that they're pretty dependent forming and that they aren't stimulating the parts of the brain where actual learning occurs. Then we want technologies that entertain. And then at the very top, we want to use technologies that hurt as little as possible. And so one thing that becomes an issue here, if your child does play a lot of violent video games, or you know that they are very drawn to highly sexualized content, maybe some of you have even young children who have been exposed to porn and are now feeling very dependent. What we want to do is try to we want to titrate. So we want to find technologies that can entertain, engaging the parts of the violent or sexualized content that engages them. Usually it's either strategy or a desire for intense connection. So we want to find technologies that won't hurt them, that engage similar kinds of dynamics, either high levels of strategy or that allow a lot of really meaningful, intense connection. Okay, you can use that's what I was kind of talking about. You can use your child's tech tendencies to help you kind of come up with creative options. If they, are wanting to use tech because they're wanting to consume YouTube videos over and over, help them find ways that they can create YouTube videos and create a channel that you can control if you want who follows and doesn't. Or if they are, constantly watching game tutorials, maybe you ask them to do a live tutorial for you and your partner, or for you, so that you can play with them once or twice. But use those kinds of things to actually kind of transfer some of their use into embodied spaces. Oh, that's such a good question. How do we know what kinds of screen time are actually educational? One of your best resources is right here, Common Sense Media. It reviews almost all technology that is out there, and it has parental reviews, professional reviews from people like me or educators, and then child reviews. So you can really read, and then it's a great source for you to sit next to your child, which I would encourage you as part of having these conversations and getting buy-in, is that you have your child and you expose each other to what you're doing on your phones and on your devices, and everybody kind of sees where everyone's spending their time, and then everybody kind of thinks together about, is this helpful or not? Is this going to be a life affirming and brain building media or not? Okay, I'm going to get really quickly through these next slides, and then I'm going to come to these questions because they're so great. Just like we talked about, creation versus is always better than passive consumption. And I do want to make a little side note about TikTok. It's where a lot of us are spending time right now, and it can be a really fun place to spend time. The thing that I want to say about it is that it's also a place where children, and I have a group of kind of adolescents through young adults that are constantly, they're kind of part of a research group that they fill me in every week. And it is a place of great pain for a lot of kids, because they easily can see people shooting up to, millions of views. And for kids that have that happen and then drop off to nothing, it is we've had a couple suicides that have been, parents and families have speculatingly tied them to trends on TikTok. Of course, it's not TikTok's fault, but what can happen there? It is also a source of a lot of bullying. People can make pretty difficult comments to people. So if we're gonna consume TikTok, I would be wanting to consume it together and create it together and kind of create some really good norms before we just let children loose there. I think it's really important to know that. A lot of, also TikTok is facing a couple of lawsuits for child harassment that we need to just take really seriously. Okay, the D is teaching digital discernment. Basically, the big thing that I want to say here, and I'm going to skip these next few slides, they're just about building the brain, and we would talk about that later. But we want slow-moving content. Slow-moving content is something where basically the brain is being forced to wire all 4 regions of the brain. So these are the 4 regions of the brain. There's an upstairs, a downstairs, a left, and a right. And technology that moves very, very fast and that has those things that we talked about content-wise before: violent, sexualized, monetized. So there's a lot of advertising, which is just brighter, happier, louder, more dysregulating, and then rigid gender stereotypes. Those kinds of content push the wiring of the brain down into the left downstairs brain. And when that happens, we basically lose the ability to kind of use all the regions of the brain because of pruning. So we just want to teach our children to discern the types of content, to use those 4 types much less, substituting in meaningful kinds of tech and embodied experiences that will still let them, indulge their need for strategy or engagement, but that won't harm them in the use. Now, okay, I'm going to try to do something really tricky and skip through a bunch of slides that I think, yeah, okay. So these are the ones, if you're going to take a screenshot, this is it. These are the ones that you really want to help. And again, getting buy-in, not just coming in and saying, we're not going to do these things, but helping your child understand how these kinds of content can really impact them and can make them, actually can cause them to feel very high levels of psychological distress within them, and then helping them find ways, whatever that, so this often comes up for a child, let's say, who loves the Disney Channel. And if you think about it, the Disney Channel has some of the most egregious gender rigid stereotyped content and highly sexualized content, and it is 100% monetized. So they love these shows. Well, I would be looking for, very high quality, slow moving, non-monetized content, which you can find on sites like Canopy, that's Canopy with a K, and on Common Sense Media, on PBS Kids, and then for adolescents, you can look at my website. I have resources, but you want to find, suitable alternatives while you're dialing back that kind of content. And then finally with E, I cannot stress enough how much we want to set up our environment. Part of getting buy-in about setting some limits or helping our child have a healthy relationship with technology is about offering them an environment that is embodied. If you think about it, Kansas was very sepia, so Dorothy felt very drawn to Oz. But at the end of the movie and the end of the story, what does she want? She just wants to go home. And this is what I find when I talk to teenagers and young adults and children, is that even though they love their technology and it is immersive in beautiful ways, they also, at the end of the day, have this small longing to find a way back into themselves. And the only way I know to do that is to, again, have those complex conversations and to do this really difficult work of setting up your environment and your home so that it offers opportunities for all 5 of everyone's senses to be stimulated, and so that they have muses that are kind of worthy of stepping away from technology for. So for instance, I have a pull-up bar in my door here, and I have all kinds of, my coffee tables are filled with Etch-a-Sketches, and I have jump ropes and balance boards on the floor and bowls of kinetic sand. I oftentimes at universities will set up procrastination stations, and one of the favorite things people do is paint their hand with watercolor paints and then paint it with Elmer's glue, and it takes 10 full minutes to let that glue dry and peel it off. And the cool thing is that research tells us that 10 minutes of boredom or mindfulness meditation can actually push wiring into that prefrontal cortex and double the gray matter there. This is just a bowl of kinetic sand. You can have things around like Luna sticks, or have your child use technology, have them, maybe they earn a little bit of video game time by using technology to teach them something like this, which is like a kendama trick. There are all kinds of sites that you can use where your children can learn learn really cool skills. And then I want to give you one last embodied idea that happens to be my favorite one, and then I'm going to address these questions, and that is ice blocking. And I checked with my my pediatrician. I have two pediatrician friends who are very involved at the front lines of COVID, and said, can I actually suggest ice blocking? And they said, absolutely, if everybody uses their own towel, their own block, and it's just the people that you're sheltering with. Basically, you go to a convenience store, you buy a block of ice for each person, you go to a park that has hills, preferably after dark because you're not supposed to be there, and you sit on the ice block and you slide down. When you are offering opportunities like this for your kiddos, it makes it such that you get a little bit of credibility for helping them navigate their tech use a little more by just being a grown person who can engage in fun with them. So I am going to click on my screen, which is going to let me look at these. Oh, ice blocking. You can get blocks of ice at most convenience stores. If you ask them, if they don't have them in the general freezer section, they usually have them in the back, and they're usually sometimes they're $1, sometimes they're $1.25. Okay, so let's look at this. Do you have rescue and recovery ideas for kids that are struggling to regulate during or after screen? Oh yes, during or after screen time, one neurotypical and one not, who had almost no screen time previously, and we don't have TV and recently added internet access. So grateful that you brought this up. And I'm so sorry I don't know how to give you a prettier view here. So what is important to know is, especially with violent and sexualized and monetized content, the research doesn't involve that strong gender stereotype category here, but violent, sexualized, and monetized content dysregulates both the neurological firing of the brain and the endocrine system, meaning that the release of hormones is very profound with those kinds of stimulation. I should also say with fast moving stimulation, so stimulation where there's constantly something moving on the screen. And so what happens is when the body is dysregulated in that way, it appears that the body maintains that state of dysregulation for 30 minutes post every hour of play. Some research studies show that that's cumulative. So if somebody has played a game or watched something that is highly stimulating, even if it's educational and it's highly stimulating, that if it's been 2 hours, that it's a full hour that the body maintains its dysregulated state. And this is why all of my new research that I'm working on is all about self-soothing and boredom tolerance. Because if we have a practiced ability to bring ourselves to calm, if we actually are practicing the ability to regulate, so what I would do in those situations, the rescue and recovery ideas would be to practice ahead of time. Okay, everybody, this is a drill. Everybody's going to pretend like they're on their screens, and we're going to step away, and we're literally going to 3 or 4 times, or we're going to step away from our screens. And when we do that, we are going to sit on the floor. We're literally going to take 5 minutes to wiggle if we need to wiggle, because that's a way of kind of getting the adrenaline out of our system. That will also, wiggling, crossing the body. So if you're using your arms across this way or even up and down and crossing, that will also help kind of bring the brain down to calm. So practicing any kind of regulation skill is going to help you in that situation. There was also a question about how do we know what is good educational content? A general rule of thumb, which makes me so angry, part of what I struggle with in this work is the reality of the huge digital divide, and that not everyone has access to high quality content because it is expensive, or high quality delivery sources. And so as a rule of thumb, educational content that is, again, slow moving, where there's one thing happening on a screen at a time rather than multiple things happening on the screen at a time, are better. Educational content that you do not have to watch advertisements in order to engage, or where you can bank the advertisements. There are some now where they're letting the parents watch all the ads, and then when the child takes the tablet, they have only the educational content. That would be, those are, you know, higher, kind of the gold standard. And then also you can look at NEA.org, the National Education Association.org, and they review and list educational content providers. And it's really, I think, important to take a look at that, because they can help you be guided to great resources. Okay. I'm going to read this question. So this is a person who has a 7. Oh, because there's no pressure. So we're maybe not going to address this question. Tristan, can you let me know, should I address this question or not?
Sure. Well, I think it's a pretty simple question, actually. It really is just like if school is sending you like videos to watch and things that are through video, can you as a parent just watch the video and then teach your kid the thing so they don't have all that time on the screen?
I think that is such a fantastic question. And the answer is yes, you can. At least you can tell them that I told you you could. And the other thing that I want to stress with that is that one of the tools that I'm finding to be particularly helpful with high school age students right now is those kiddos hate being manipulated, right? And so if we can help them see, like, these are the ways that technology manipulates us. Can you believe this? You know, Netflix tries to get us to watch more by letting us skip the end credits and go right into the next show. And well, suddenly 5 hours are gone. Can you believe they have manipulated us in this way? And empowering them to help you all as a family become ways of identifying the ways you're manipulated has been a really great way of kind of increasing conversations and also kind of becoming a unified front and staying healthy with our tech.
This is amazing. I was feeling embarrassed because I was like, oh, I have to unmute myself and they'll hear my kids playing in the backyard. And then I was like, no, 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 this is a good example. Now that it's
It's
warm
the
enough, my kids
best.
are like having an embodied experience of doing one thing at a time, which is just like playing in the yard. Um, Another thing that I just saw today that I wanted to suggest is that it looks like Airbnb is now doing online experiences. And so I thought tonight I would give my kids the option, all of them are like 10 bucks or less, of choosing an online experience that they would want to do. There's secrets, learning the secrets of magic, tour an animal sanctuary, make cheese, create your own skincare and natural skincare products, cartoon drawing, how to make salsa. So I was just thinking a lot about what you were saying in terms of how do we kind of hack their love of screens to do it for something that is creative, that's engaging them. And with that live thing, I think there is something where you're not necessarily getting the eye contact, but it's not a passive thing that's happening to you. So yeah, I took like a billion notes.
Tristan, can I say one more thing? I referenced Canopy, and most in the US, most libraries offer Canopy free to their patrons. And I know at least libraries in Oregon right now are, for people who don't have library cards, you can get one virtually and you can access Canopy, and it has some of the most high quality children's content and instructional content you can get.
Great, and I'll put that in the chat so that everyone can see that as well. Well, we have gone just a teensy bit over when I was expecting to end, and like I could continue to listen to you for a long time. I just like to end when we say we're going to end, so that way people can do their thing. And so many amazing resources. Follow Doreen on Instagram. She's doing all these amazing Instagram lives and just little pick-me-ups and little ideas for how to get grounded and centered throughout the day. I took a lot of notes, and you can go to her website too to learn even more about some of these core ideas. The sort of like ABC stuff is all there. And when things get back to normal and you're ready to balance life and technology, even with more intentionality, I like Doreen was like, don't tell them about the book because it's for normal times. It's not for this time, but it's still really good information to be having. So thank you all again so much for being with us. Please, when you get a moment, check out all the other things that we're doing online. And if you have other ideas, if you have like your favorite author, this amazing presenter, someone whose TED Talk you saw that you think is going to be particularly helpful for LGBTQ plus parents and families, send them to me. I will track them down. One of my favorite writers, Andrew Solomon, who wrote Far from the Tree and The Noonday Demon, he's going to be doing a special reading for us in just a couple of weeks. So yeah, and also the author who wrote Rosie Revere, engineer, who's one of my favorite like feminist kids book authors. She's doing a reading for us in a couple of weeks. So yeah, we want to be totally responsive to you and what you need and what would bring your family joy right now. And thank you again so much, Doreen, for being with us. I truly, truly appreciate being connected with you and spending time with you today.